Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I feel like I'm a little overdressed. Stephen, you should have given me a heads up. I've come in shorts too.
I mean, my wife saw how I was dressed when I left the house, and she said, "Shorts? Really?" But I thought it was authentic. This is how I go to work, so I think it's fair enough.
I love it. Full disclosure, I do not dress like this to work. I thought Stephen was going to come in a full suit. All joking aside, pleasure to be here with you. My name is Eric Omwega, Chief Operating Officer at RudderStack, and I'm pleased to be joined by Stephen. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Stephen Collings, and I work at Houseful. I've been at Houseful for about a decade now, which seems kind of crazy when I say it out loud. For about half of that time, I've been working as an internal data consultant, so based in the central data and analytics team. And really the role is all about maximizing the value that the company gets from data. So that could be working on any different kind of initiative, across kind of product marketing, working cross-functionally. And for the last few years, that's been a focus on user data, hence interests in CDPs and being here today.
Fantastic. Thank you. So the first part of the presentation, I will walk through a bit about Houseful and Zoopla. We'll spend a couple minutes talking about RudderStack, and then this is going to be a fireside chat. We'll save 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please save them towards the end. So you want to tell us a little bit about Houseful and Zoopla?
Yeah, so this is our mission statement, which is creating the connections that power better property decisions. What that means in effect is if you are buying, selling, letting, renting, or managing a property, be that in a kind of B2C sense or a B2B sense, like anyone who's involved in that process, we're here to help you. And that means you're either a current customer or user of our products, or potentially that you could be. And if I had to pick kind of one keyword out of that, it would probably be connections. Really, we are looking to, create more connections between the data, the services, and ultimately the people who are involved in all of those processes, like buying a home, for example. This is a little bit about kind of the structure of the company. So Houseful is the overall company and brand. Within that, we have 3 business units. So we've got software. So software is B2B. Alto and Dupix being the kind of 2 brands that they market CRM software. So for our customers who are estate agents and new homes developers, obviously those are very important tools for them to be able to run their businesses. Increasingly, we kind of move into this concept of a transaction network. And this is where Your Keys comes in. And that's very much about building those connections along the property buying process. So that's kind of linking in with different services and tools and companies, other people who could be involved, like lenders and conveyances and surveyors and that kind of thing. Then we've got data and risk. So the 2 brands here are HomeTrack and Calcasa. They do similar things in so much that they are focused primarily on the mortgage market, and it's all about valuation tools, automation tools, risk management tools. And the distinction here is that HomeTrack is UK based, and Calcasa is based in the Netherlands, whereas every other part of the company is UK, but Calcasa is Netherlands. And then we've got Homes. So Homes is where we're going to be speaking about today. Homes is where we've got probably our most well-known brand, which is Zoopla. I'm going to take a risk now, and I'm going to ask for a show of hands of who's heard of Zoopla. That's good.
It's impressive.
How many people have used Zoopla? That's also good. Like I thought it was going to be a risk, but no, it's good, and that's what our research would show, is that we're a very well-known brand, especially in this part of the country as well. So in that part of the business, we care about B2B and also B2C. So we have the same customers that I talked about before in terms of estate agents and new homes developers listing their, the properties they want to sell on site. But also we've got users coming to site. So it's the likes of me and you going on trying to find our next property, our next home. And so we obviously this is where CDPs and RudderStack and segmentation comes into play. The other thing worth mentioning is that kind of Zoopla starts as like a pure property portal. So it's about finding your next home. But increasingly we've added things like My Home, and that's a section of the site where you can manage your home. So when you're outside of that kind of buying, selling, renting cycle, you still have a place to come where you can learn about the value of your property, how that changes over time, and also what's going on in your local market and your local area. And then there's also additional services that come off the back of that, and that's where Mojo comes in, because they're an online mortgage broker, so you can get a remortgage quote from them as well. And that's Houseful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So first of all, impressive show of hands. That's, by my estimation, about 95% market share, which is pretty impressive. Sounds like you cover the full life cycle of the home buying process. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess what we're trying to do is that, I suppose these different bits of the business have been acquired at different times, and also I guess the UK property market can feel quite fragmented, and that experience of buying a property can be slow and can be frustrating, and that's what we aim to improve by, say, integrating different parts of the journey, and then also, say, Home Tracking Carcassa, they are more kind of like a pure data business. So you can imagine that the shared kind of data that you have across the group is super interesting when it comes to building analytical products about the property market.
Fantastic. We'll get to the data use cases in a bit. But first, just a quick overview of RudderStack. We call ourselves a warehouse native customer data platform, and we exist to turn customer data into competitive advantage. What does that mean? We often think of ourselves in the context of the customer data lifecycle. Three primary components of the lifecycle. The one that folks are most familiar with is activation. Activation is really around sending the right message at the right time, right, to a potential prospect or potential customer, right? That is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to customer data. That said, the primary challenges that we see a lot of companies face are further upstream of activation. So that's the data collection and data unification. That's why when RudderStack was launched about 5 years ago, we focused on collecting data that you can trust. And that's collecting customer data from every single customer touch point, right? And then unifying that data on top of your cloud data warehouse, right? So we are cloud data warehouse agnostic. That's why we're called warehouse native. So if you're using Databricks, Redshift, BigQuery, RudderStack provides the data infrastructure to both collect the data from every customer touchpoint, the modeling to unify that data with our identity stitching profiles product, and then making that data both analytics ready, but then also activation ready, where the rubber meets the road to deliver delightful experiences to customers. A quick overview of RudderStack, and I know one of the first questions I ask when I'm in this forums: how did you manage your customer data, across a life cycle before RudderStack, and what motivated the switch to RudderStack?
Yeah, so the history for us, I guess, is that about 2019 we became a segment customer. So, and then we made the transition this year. So we did 5 years with segment. I think prior to that, the answer is we didn't really manage it, and we knew that we had real untapped potential in our consumer data, and we didn't have a handle around it, we didn't have our arms around it, we weren't doing anything with it, we weren't activating it. So Segment was our first CDP, and that got us on the journey, and it allowed us to kind of put together an internal brand and a vision around creating a home for our data, building these single profiles, and then starting to stitch them in to all of the key activation points. And we in fairness, we made really good progress with that, and we started to get value from our data. But then, I guess probably I suppose we had a kind of creeping sense that maybe we were starting to outgrow the tool, or that perhaps it wasn't the best possible fit for us anymore. There was a price increase that absolutely made it clear to us that it was probably time for us to move on from Segment. But even before we got to that point, the nature of the tool and being a packaged CDP, and the fact that you have to store your data in that platform, was kind of going against what we were doing elsewhere. So we were putting lots of investments in our own data platform. That came on leaps and bounds between sort of 2019 and where we are today. And increasingly, it just didn't feel like it made any sense anymore, because we were kind of managing some data over here and some data over here. And we increasingly didn't kind of use some of Segment's functionalities in terms of its audience building. And we found that it was too limiting, it was too flaky. It just didn't make sense anymore. So we were kind of, by degrees, backing ourselves out of the tool and increasingly using our data platform, using the data warehouse, but we were paying for the privilege of having all the data stored somewhere else, and we just didn't need that anymore. So that got us to the point of evaluating the market, and then obviously doing a POC process with a few vendors.
Makes a lot of sense. The question that I have top of mind is, what were the primary use cases or business outcomes you're looking to deliver from customer data, from your customer data, and how did RudderStack fit into your broader data infrastructure to deliver on those business outcomes?
So I guess given that we were we weren't starting from scratch. This wasn't greenfield. We'd already established a lot of kind of use cases and flows of data with Segment. So we kind of knew what capabilities we were looking for from a new tool. But clearly the business outcomes for us were we'd already wired into Iterable as our email tool, and also push notifications and pop-ups and that kind of thing. So we knew Iterable was going to play a big role, and that was going to be a key destination for us. Also all the ad platforms, so that the Facebook ads, the Google ads, TikTok, etc. So we knew that was there. On-site, we were using Google Ad Manager. We've now transitioned to using Permutive as a tool, but we knew that was another channel that we were going to publish our audiences and get kind of value from them. And then the last bit was on-site personalization as well. So we were using kind of Segment's profile API to do some online sort of nudging and personalization of experience. So we knew that we kind of needed a tool that would fit all of those things, while also we wanted to lower the cost of the platform, and also we wanted to kind of open this platform up to a wider number of people, because I think Segment was seen a little bit as this kind of tool that sits on the side and a few people know about it, and you have to do some stuff in a UI. It wasn't so accessible to, our engineering community and our analytics engineers and our analysts. And so we really wanted to kind of unlock the platform for a wider number of people to participate in, while also being able to fulfill all the use cases that we were already doing.
Got it. One tension that we often see is the tension between the need to bring more stakeholders in to the data, so around data flexibility of whatever platform you're using, and then on the other hand is having the data team having full control over the data. How have you managed this tension within Zoopla?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I guess what we are lucky in some sense that we kind of have been the de facto owner of the CDP from the get-go. So we had a strong amount of control about how we evolved the platform and how we made a new selection of a tool. Equally, we don't try and do everything centrally in the platform and everything in the warehouse. So we adopted this idea of building a foundational data model with the key segments for our business and all the key calculated attributes, and then federating those to the different activation tools. So in that way that you could kind of get people building their bespoke campaign lists exactly as they wanted, but they didn't have kind of some central dependency on us to build everything for them. I think the next place that we're going, and this is kind of dovetails with our overall data strategy, is to start to decentralize more of the underlying data ownership, so that it's not kind of the data team being like the sole arbiters of kind of all data. And things like tracking plans will help us with that, right? Because we can devolve tracking responsibilities, but we can still have really tight control over the quality of that data.
Got it. The one additional tension that we often see as well is the role that the data team plays within the organizations that they're in, right? And how did you get a seat at the table as a data team, right? We often see business teams, whether it's marketing, kind of driving the agenda from a data infrastructure standpoint. How did you and your team get a seat at the table at Zoopla?
Yeah, I think I'd say there's probably two sort of parts to that. One is, I think we just took the initiative. So we could see that we were underserving the potential of this data within the business. So I guess we knew things that maybe other people in the business didn't know, because we knew, if you like, that locked up power of the data. So we could just see it, right? And we could see that if we spent some time looking after this data, creating a home for it, creating a vision, creating a brand, we could be the drivers of it. So it was a little bit, I don't know if it's like opportunistic, but we kind of just saw it and we thought, well, we're going to go for that. Now, obviously, that's kind of easier said than done. I guess the other thing we had is when we kicked this all off, we had a director of data at that time who was very, very empowering. And so she was changing the culture of us as a team from being kind of like a request taker and being on the end of stuff to actually being an initiator and making stuff happen and creating value. So I guess at that more senior level, she was fighting our corner for that and pushing for it and pushing for investment. So I think, we had that air support to make it happen. But yeah, she really instilled the idea that the value, this wasn't just going to happen, right? Like this needed someone to take a lead, and she empowered us to just go after it.
That's amazing. I think one of the most frustrating failure modes for data teams that we see is when they're just data takers, order takers rather, right? Where the business teams submit tickets and they deliver on those tickets. So, and
I think, and there's no doubt that some of that still goes on, right? Like there are still, we still get requests and we do things. But I think what we identified is there were kind of areas of opportunity that were going effectively unclaimed and untapped. And actually, sort of strategically, from the data team's perspective, that was ground that we wanted to take because it was going to be good for us. Also, I think sometimes data teams can struggle to show things like return on investment and contributions to revenue. Well, all of this stuff's great, right? Because as much as some of this is about driving first-party engagement and deeper relationships, we're obviously doing this on behalf of our customers as well. And they're the ones that pay us most of the money, right? So the estate agents, the new homes developers, they effectively want access to our audiences. So for a data team, this is a great place to play in because you can easily attach and you can see the revenue on the end of it.
Yeah. We strongly believe at RudderStack that data teams need to own the entire data lifecycle and serve other teams. The reason why is you understand the data at a fundamental level and know the art of the possible, and being able to connect those two, only the data teams can do that in service of the broader business goals. Any questions for Stephen or myself? I have a lot of questions. We could talk for another hour, but want to open it up for questions. Yes.
So from your initial intro, so segment, you had to ship over your data, right? Whereas with RudderStack, what's the use case there? Can I, as a customer, still have the data in my own premises or my own cloud infrastructure? And also, the second part of that question is, if you do have part of that data for efficiency or whatever, how much for control can I have in terms of data governance? Can it be limited by region or country? How further down can you actually control and limit it from being stored or warehoused somewhere else?
Great question. I'll restate the question in case folks didn't hear it. In migrating from Segment to RudderStack, how much... do we actually have a mic for questions? The question is, does RudderStack store data? That's the first question. The second question is, how much control and access do you have to, with regards to the data, and whether you have the ability to pick where that data resides from a geographic standpoint. You want to take that, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, that was the appeal of RudderStack, really, is that we looked at different potential replacements for Segment, and they were a mix of, I guess, they get called various things, but kind of like packaged CDPs and composable CDPs. We were pretty set on the idea that we wanted to put our platform in our warehouse like bang in the middle of this, and we really just wanted a tool that would act more of a kind of a thin layer and a skin across the top. So yeah, I mean that's what RudderStack does for us, right? Like we're using it as a tag manager to collect the data, but ultimately all of that flows into our own data lake, and then all the processing happens in our own Redshift, like we're AWS predominantly, but we basically host all of it. So we get full control over the infrastructure. Obviously, you have to pay for that infrastructure, but the total cost of ownership for us of trading from Segment to RudderStack, plus having to bring the infrastructure spend ourselves, it still saved hundreds of thousands of pounds. And obviously, you get all of that control with it as well.
Thank you for that. The other answer is we do have, because we don't store data, we can actually host our data plane in different geographic regions. So most of our European customers is hosted in a data center in Frankfurt. Yeah. Yes, at the back there.
Hi. You mentioned great internal benefits from the CDP, like cost savings and so on. From a Zoopla user experience, how did they feel the difference of having a better CDP on your end?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we're 2 months into the migration so far, as we only concluded it, I think it's end of June, beginning of July. So, I mean, the migration was really about moving things we already had. So the personalization features on the site, which they were powered by Segment, now they're powered by RudderStack. I mean, I think some of the benefits that are going to bring should be the speed that we can kind of develop stuff, because now this is a much more open platform, and the data is kind of easier for people to get to. So I think, I mean, that for me is going to be the speed that we can increment the kind of models that sit behind the scenes and the new features that we can bring to site. I mean, we use I think it's the profile API, isn't it, with RudderStack, as our kind of single point of call to get these traits back. But under the covers, there's a lot more people who can contribute to building things, and I think that's going to be one of the benefits that we'll see.
Thank you. We had a question at the back there.
Sorry, who had the hand up?
Yeah.
I had a very similar question, actually, just to, how someone might experience things differently, and I think you've covered that off a little bit for users of the site. I don't know if there's anything you'd add from maybe an estate agent point of view to what benefits you might see for them, where you might get additional results from having had the data joined up in this way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because ultimately we're doing things that this is on site, this is in the app, so it's stuff that a user who's using our product is going to experience. One of the things that we try and do is to drive people down funnels. So if we can understand more about someone's kind of state in their current search journey or what they're looking for, that allows us to nudge them towards, the outcome that we think that they're after. Ultimately, one of those outcomes is going to be generation of leads to be sent to estate agents and new homes developers. Also, I think we see that, making predictions and if you like, kind of guessing what someone's going to do next or the position that they're in is obviously really helpful and really valuable, but we kind of want it to create a dialogue as well. So acquiring more zero-party data and kind of co-authoring the user profile is something that we definitely believe in, and ultimately, those estate agents and new homes developers who pay money on a subscription and premium products to us, what they're paying for is access to audiences. They want to connect to the right person at the right time, and that would likely manifest in a lead. But we do this to make sure that we can better serve our customers.
Yep, right here at the front.
Thanks. You mentioned a bit earlier that you use a tag manager to collect events across different customer touch points. One of the pain points we see when tracking user events is that different touch points will use different naming conventions, and they'll create different changes at different times, which impacts on data quality. It can break some of the use cases downstream. Are there any things that you're doing to kind of manage those changes or enforce like consistent standards or governance?
So I guess there's a mix of the sources that we directly own, like the web and the app, and we certainly did some work as part of the migration to kind of completely align our tracking spec for the web and the app, so to try and get that right up front. Obviously, there's some sources where we might not fully control exactly how that stuff's going to arrive to us. What is it going to be called? How it's going to be structured? So, and stuff can go wrong, right? Bad things can happen. So, tracking plans are a key part of that for us to govern the arrival of data and I guess almost like the triaging of it. Like, we don't want that stuff polluting our data lake, so we can kind of like push that off to one side, we can look at it, and then we make heavy use of transformations in the product. So if there's any, you can use it for kind of like old, like malformed data, you can get that back through and play it back through and land it in your data lake. But also for specific use cases where we need to get an event, and we do this with, iterable, we send custom events through to iterable, and they might need to be in an exact kind of structure or with an exact kind of an enrichment. So we use the transformations products in RudderStack fairly extensively to make sure that we can absolutely get that data exactly right before we forward it on. And then whoever's on the end of using that, like, they shouldn't have any worries. Like, we can basically guarantee the quality and the, not just the quality in terms of its right, but I guess the quality in terms of its structure and appropriateness for the use case that's intended.
Great. Any final questions? We've got 2 minutes left. Well, I had to ask a question on what everybody's been talking about over the last year and a half, AI, ML. Are there specific use cases you're using, you're unlocking AI or ML use cases using customer data?
So yeah, we have data scientists. We are using this data after we land it in our data lake to build ML models. Predictive models, certainly around sort of like high value outcomes. And again, to someone's point earlier about lead generation is a huge part of what we do. And so making sure that we're treating those people who are most likely to send leads in the right way is a key part for us. In terms of kind of what comes next on that journey, I suppose I think of it in sort of three ways. First of all, it's making sure, to the point there, quality of data. So as we all know, like everyone talks about, like you can think about all these things, but it all comes from high quality data you can trust. So that's a major part of RudderStack, tracking plans, governance, making the stuff available. So we guarantee the quality of what we're collecting. the next bit is, I think we're getting more towards kind of more like micro personalization. So rather than just kind of the broad brush, you're a first time buyer, I know you're a downsizer, upsizer, etc., is really kind of in that moment, what does that person need to see? And I do think I really, believe in this kind of co-authoring, like making intelligent suggestions, but also getting that feedback from the user so that they really get what they want, because there should be a fair value exchange. Like they get something, they give us something, they get something back. And then that's almost, I guess, your trad AI. I don't know if that's what we're calling it now, but like more the kind of gen AI stuff. I mean, obviously there's something interesting about, a site that has lots of information, text and images, and the search experience. And I think there's something there, and we continue to kind of look and evaluate it. But of course, we also need to be quite careful, right? Because this is the biggest purchase anyone's ever going to make, and having a model that might suggest kind of like random hallucinations or whatever, we need to tread gently with that, I think, for now.
Fantastic, great answer. And I always say that all of these use cases are great, but you need a solid data foundation to be able to build them at scale. But thank you so much, Stephen. We are out of time. We are available for questions for the next few minutes. We also have a booth downstairs, RudderStack. I should stop by and say hello. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Appreciate
Cheers.
it. Yeah.